Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for our webinar, Social Media for B2B. My name's Jill, and with me today is Ellery Long, and he's going to be presenting this webinar all about social media for B2B companies. Just a couple things before we get started. First of all, this webinar will be about an hour long. At the end, we will have time for Q&A, so if you do think of some questions along the way, go ahead and type those into the box that you see in your GoToWebinar window, and we'll be happy to answer as many of those as we can at the end of the webinar. To answer the question we get at every webinar, is this being recorded? The answer is yes, it is. We are recording this. This will be up on our help site next week, so if you want to take a look at it to get a refresher, we'll have that up there in about a week's time. So with that, I'm going to hand this over to Ellery.
Thank you, Jill. Step one, let's just dive right into it. Forget everything you think you know about social media. So the reason that we decided to do this webinar is I do social media webinars at least once a month about different social media topics or social media in general for your business. And consistently, the questions that we get, the predominant question we get is, how do I apply this to my business-to-business business? And I feel your pain. Many of the examples that I use are very much B2C oriented. And that's primarily because that's what's out there. That's what you see the most. That's what's most front of mind when you think about social marketing is B2C. But the answer that I give generally is, that you should just be able to take those B2C examples and apply the lessons behind them to B2B, but that's not always straightforward enough, so we thought it'd be a good idea to do something that really focuses on B2B businesses that are doing social well. So forget everything that you think you know about social media. Is really, hey, the internet is not just about posting pictures of your kitty cats or whatever it is, and that really there's a lot of potential in social for the B2B business. So what is that? Social media has a real business value. First off, and this is really the easiest to do, is gaining consumer perception. You don't even have to have a social media presence yourself to pull some insights out of the social conversations that are already happening. Now, you can ask your customers what they think about your product or service. You can send out surveys, talk to them in person, but you don't always get maybe the most frank feedback because people are generally polite about things like that. With a little bit of spying on social media accounts, whether it's Twitter or LinkedIn conversations, you can start actually seeing how consumers think about either your brand specifically or just the industry you're in, and that can be really, really great information when deciding how to optimize your marketing moving forward. Word of mouth marketing is kind of the big one, the one that everyone thinks about with social media, and that really comes down to just leveraging your existing customers as evangelists on your behalf, going out and talking about your product across the social web. Similarly, you can use social media to engage influencers that are online and try and get them to cover your product or service. So this is, bloggers who are influential in the space that your business is in, and starting to create and nurture relationships with those people that can make a real big difference on how your brand is covered and perceived in social media. If you're in a business that has customer service or customer support, social media can be a great way to cut down costs there and also get services to your customers faster than the traditional methods of phone, email, or person-to-person. Also, engaging your customers on a platform that's part of their daily routine already. So, well, I certainly, and Jill can too, and I would say I can speak for most of you that there's at least one social network, probably Facebook, that you check into at least once a day. So rather than relying on email or other traditional forms of communication where you're really depending on an action from the customer, the recipient of your email, to open it and engage with it, by jumping into conversations where they already are, you put yourself in a position to reach people who might not necessarily be already subject to your messaging. And finally, the big question, and I think it's even bigger when it comes to B2B, is talking about lead generation and return on investment. And yes, it's possible, and we're going to show you a couple ways to get there. It's certainly a developing area of social media, but with link refer codes and the like set up and the links that you're using, you can start really tying back your social activity to customer acquisition. The second thing I want to do to get you in the right headspace before we dive into this is to start destroying the imaginary silos that we all build when we think about the differences between B2B and B2C. On the left, you see this guy, your typical business customer. On the right, you see this guy at home enjoying some laptop time. What you'll notice is that this is the same person, and really something that I think, it's obvious, but we totally overlook it, that B2B customers are real people too, doing the same things on social media that you think of when you think of B2C consumers. So forget about this idea of social media, everybody's doing it. Everybody is your customers, so your customers are doing it. 85% of internet users have a Facebook account. And one thing I think is interesting, especially in the B2B space, because often the people with purchasing power are people who have more experience and more seniority, if you will. And often that correlates with age. And social media is becoming more and more age agnostic as time goes on. You can see here on this chart the user penetration of social media accounts by age groups. And even up into the upper ranges, the 55 to 64, the majority of people in that age group are on some sort of social media. So this idea that your customers aren't there is really a thing of the past. And so the final thing to think about is really how you can capitalize on this, how you can embrace the rise of a new business ecosystem. It's a reality at this point. Spending is going up on online marketing in general, email, woo, and right up there, social media, blogging, webcasts, things like we're doing right now. So this is a reality, and I think most people, if you're on this webinar, I'm assuming that you've kind of accepted that reality and looking for the ways to capitalize on that. So that's what we're going to focus on this hour. A couple of overall things, if you still need a little convincing about embracing it. It's about costs, right? So cost per lead on blogs and social media are going to be the top two below average costs compared to the traditional forms that we're already doing, whether it's direct mail, trade shows, etc. So you're looking at a lower cost. How low? Well, a study from HubSpot, which is a company that really focuses on inbound marketing, which is providing content to bring people to you rather than outward messaging, quite a bit, 62% less cost per lead. And so what does that translate to? Well, it translates to customer acquisition. Here you can see some of the top social media channels, LinkedIn, blogs, Facebook, and Twitter, and the percentage of companies in both B2B and B2C space that have been able to acquire customers through these channels. But you will notice that they do split between B2B and B2C, and so my initial assertion that those customers are not different is being challenged here a little bit. And yes, I will admit that there is a difference between the B2B and B2C customer, and you have to think about what those differences are when you're thinking about your social media strategy moving forward. But it's with any business you're in, social media needs to start with your objectives. And if you're in the B2B space, then thinking about which networks are going to make more sense for your business based on where your customers are is something that's important. So yes, B2B is different. And there's a couple things to keep in mind before we jump into the examples we give. And you're going to see these bullet points resurface in all the different examples. We're much more value driven as opposed to B2C, which is mostly aspirational in nature as far as kind of what touch points you're trying to reach the customer. It's going to be more about value and kind of that cost versus benefit relationship. You're also dealing with a larger number of decision makers often. So you're not just trying to appeal to that one person. That one person may just be the beginning of a chain of people that need to make the ultimate purchase decision. So social media, you have to think about kind of the wide net and the long-term relationship building that you're casting from it. You've also got a longer sales cycle, right? So social media, I think, is great for this because unlike other channels, social media really focuses on building that long-term relationship and really, you know, working to enable that conversion and then retention moving forward. Smaller, more focused market, which I think actually works in the B2B space's advantage over B2C, is, if you're a B2C hair product company, it's like anybody who has hair could possibly be interested in my product. Whereas B2B, you've already got a head start in figuring out what areas to target. And so we'll look at different networks where you can, target different groups. And finally, it's not all fun and games. You do have to have a more knowledgeable and professional tone. But I think it's important to remember, see that serious businessman there. It's important to remember that doesn't have to mean boring. And I think there's a lot of companies in the B2B space that are having a lot of fun on social media. And we're going to look at some of them now. Before we dive into some network specific things, I just want to talk about universal strategies. Regardless, I'm going to cover blogging, Facebook, Twitter, and a couple more niche social networks, but there's going to be, for every one that I talk about today, there's another 150 that I'm not going to have time to mention. So whatever social network makes the most sense for you to be putting most of your marketing time into, there are some universal strategies to keep in mind. Number one, really those first two bullets could have been this entire slide because those are the core tenets of social media: consistency and conversation. So being consistent. Content gets really stale with social. It's not like your website that you do an audit on and a review, maybe once a year, twice a year if you're really on top of it. If somebody shows up on a page of yours on Facebook and you haven't updated in a month, it's no wonder that you're not getting those likes and you're not seeing conversions and lead acquisition with social. You really need to think about it as a day in and day out kind of activity. And part of that activity is really about conversation. It is not just outbound messaging. You need to be able to listen and respond. But I do like to note, particularly if you're in some sort of sales role, that you shouldn't be afraid to take it offline either. Social can be the beginning of what is a much greater conversation in the long run. So, maybe that conversation starts on your LinkedIn company page and you quickly move it over to email or phone or an in-person meeting. The social part of social media can't be forgotten. You have to have that relationship that you're all pros in building relationships already. It's no different when you're in a virtual space. And a couple notes on conversation. So moderation is a big issue, and I think it's an even bigger issue in the B2B space, particularly if you're dealing with regulatory issues or anything else where your legal department is freaking out of the idea that you might have people posting without any sort of filter onto your social media properties. I'm going to encourage you to I don't know how to say it, loosen up a little bit because you do want to understand the space, and this is kind of how social works. Obviously, you can't not moderate it all. There is, like anywhere else, there's spam out there, there's totally inappropriate comments. Things like that you should absolutely feel fine about deleting from your social properties. That said, as long as you have a straightforward commenting policy wherever you are, that outlines the kind of comments that will be acceptable in the forum, then you should feel fine about deleting ones that don't fall under that. But I do think that negative feedback in particular, somebody comes onto your Facebook page, for example, and slams an experience they had with your service. By responding to them publicly, so everyone can see it, and gracefully, of course, I argue that you stand to gain a lot more than you lose. I think that it's actually much less about that one person who's complaining. In fact, very well, you've already lost them. But what you're doing is sending a message to all your other fans who are interacting and already advocates of your business. Uh, by gracefully handling that one negative feedback, even though you may have lost that customer, you're going to raise your reputation in the minds of everyone else who's watching that. And that's what we really care about, is gaining those advocates. It goes all back to that evangelizing on your behalf. When you're asking and hoping for kind of some viral spread to the messaging you're putting out on social media, it's all about that second, third, and so on levels of connections in the social space. So you want to make it really easy for people to share. And I'm going to show you some examples of what I mean of that. But wherever you are, make sure that there's share buttons, anything else that's going to enable your first wave of readers to share that content. The content cannot be all about you. Self-promotion has plenty of areas that you already have taken care of, whether it's your emails, whether it's your corporate website, whatever it is, there are places that your customers expect to be sold to, right? But social media is not that place. It's about maintaining that relationship and about sharing useful and helpful content. So that content, more often than not, is not directly about your business. And I'll explain what that means as well. And finally, include call to action buttons everywhere. Not only buttons, call to action in general. Think about, no matter what content you're sharing, what ultimately do you want that viewer, that reader to do? Is it register for a webinar? Is it provide their email address for a sales piece to go out to them? Is it sign up for an event? Whatever your objective is, make sure that you plaster the page that your customer is on with that direct call to action. Finally, your customers cannot find you on social media if they don't know you're there. So think about every little place that you can promote your social presence. So if you're doing traditional marketing, maybe you advertise in some trade publications, email, across the social platforms that you do have an audience on. Make sure that you're mentioning your social presence. That said, you can't just say, hey, we're on Facebook. We all know that everybody's on Facebook now. You see that message on every email you get, every magazine you see, every Super Bowl commercial. It says, hey, we're on Facebook, come check us out. You need to give a reason. You need to compel them to come and join you on your social networks. What that is up to you. It could be things like promotions, giveaways, special deals. Those are kind of the most obvious, you see a lot, but it could also just be expertise, up-to-date news. Whatever it is, really go out there in your messaging and make sure to communicate clearly what someone is going to get by connecting with you socially. And so here's a great example of that. This is EMC Corporation. They'll give a virtual pass to their online conference trade it for a like, essentially. You like their page and you get that. But it's not only the virtual pass. Down below, you're getting exclusive access to different keynotes and broadcasts. You can be entered to win tickets to the physical event. You get a free account. This is some product offering of theirs. So they make it really clear that there is something in it for the customer by clicking that like button. So now that we've gotten that basis out of the way, I wanted to look at a couple areas that I think make a lot of sense in the B2B space, and that's blogs. We're going to talk about Facebook, we're going to talk about Twitter, and then I've got a handful of slides at the end, some less front-of-mind networks that I think you should probably consider. You will notice that I did not mention LinkedIn, and that is by design. LinkedIn is obviously the default for B2B, and I think that B2B marketers, for the most part, have a pretty good grasp on it. Also, we're doing a webinar next month dedicated just to LinkedIn. So it'll be an hour focused only on LinkedIn. So you can get a lot of value out of that too if you're looking to build up your LinkedIn. I do have a couple mentions of some specific LinkedIn features today, but not really kind of best practices for the network in general. So blogs. I think blogs for B2B make a ton of sense. For one, statistics back that up. So companies that blog have 55% more website visitors, generate 67% more leads per month than those who do not. And again, it comes down to that ROI, right? That purchase. Blog articles influence purchases. It really helps in all these are all different things: refining choices, discovery, deciding on what that final purchase is going to be. All the different kind of spots on the cycle, blogs have a direct influence on. The reason I love blogs, though, is that it's really the only kind of piece of social media where you are completely in control of your destiny, if you will. You are the destination. Whereas Facebook, you're asking people to go to Facebook, and you are limited by the structure with which Facebook thinks a business page should look like. In a couple weeks, I believe, it's going to be, the new timeline is going to be rolled out for businesses. That's a great example of how on other networks, you really don't have that much control over what your messaging is, or at least from a visual branding perspective. So blogs really give you that, and you're bringing people to you, and you can therefore do a lot more with the information you have about them as you create a relationship. So if you're not blogging already, a couple of things to think about going in. You really need to define your purpose. A blog that's all over the place is not going to retain readers in the same way. So figure out what you want to do, focus on your objectives, and make sure to craft your content based on that. And when you're thinking about content, again, it's not about the self-promotion, right? So it's about utility. It's what information you can provide your customers that they're going to be able to actually take action with. And hopefully that action will tie back into what you're doing and what you're selling, and we'll talk about specific content on the next slide, but just think about that. But while you're saving the self-promotion from a salesy standpoint, I would encourage you to show off your personality. What sets you apart, right? There's something nice about the blog being a extension of you as a business person. So the VR blog, for example, has a headshot and a direct link to email our CEO, Janine. And I've gotten a ton of feedback from people. How amazing is it that I can just click email me and I'm actually emailing the CEO, and you can try it. She answers. Also, don't always be worried about trying to come up with your own original content all the time. If you want to keep that consistency up and you want to stay fresh, there's a lot of content out there that you can repurpose. Don't just reprint it, copy it, etc., and obviously attribute the source of where you got it originally, but add your own perspective, add your own take. And lastly, be interactive, encourage comments, even if that just means finishing off a post with, hey, what's your take on this? Or I'd love to see some examples of what you're doing in this space. Specifically, sky's the limit on what to post, and that's going to have a lot to do with what you decide the objective of your blog is. But just to get you thinking about some different things, case studies, customer and employee interviews, things where people can really get an idea of how people have been able to use your product or service to build their own business is going to be great. That's exactly what I mean by that value-driven purchase decision-making that the B2B customer is doing. Industry-specific stuff, whether it's commentary on industry news or trends, or descriptions of industry-specific concepts. We just wrote a blog post today about a beginner's guide to SEO, and that's a great example of, we're not in the SEO business, we're not even in the website business, but our customers are small business customers who most likely are, and so we're providing that value to them without a direct tie back. How-tos are always popular. Event recaps. If you're going to an event, why not write up a summary of it? Take notes. This is stuff in your day-to-day that can help populate the content you need. And behind the scenes is also really popular, and I've got some good examples of that too. The important thing, because you're probably all wondering, well, what's the point of selling people other products, is that you can bring your content, it all loops back to what you do, right? So design your content calendar around what's going on with your company and your industry. If you're going to be rolling out a new product that is specific to financial advisors, then maybe right around that time you beef up your coverage on different trends that are happening in the financial advisor world, the world of financial advisors.
I'm not sure how to phrase it.
you know what I mean. But it does tie back, and you can really build a content calendar and help to figure out ideas by looking at what that calendar of events in your company and industry are. And finally, thinking about growing your audience, right? A blog, you don't want to put a bunch of energy into a blog if no one's reading it. So there's some things you can do to build it up. For one, again, make it social. So sharing buttons, social bookmarking, which I'll explain later. Linking to the blog across all your networks. So if you're on Facebook, share your blog on there too. It doesn't have to exist in this silo. In your email, if you get the VR buzz, you'll see that the main content provider for our newsletter is blog posts, which brings people to the blog. You want to enable RSS, which is subscriptions, so people can sign up for automatic updates when you update your blog, as well as looking for cross-promotion opportunities. So think about maybe working with other guest bloggers or asking to guest blog on somebody else's blog. Maybe there's a really influential blog in your industry that you can reach out to and see if you can write a post that links back to your blog. People who are, you're opening up your content to new audiences. And a lot of these people already have big existing audiences. And hey, who doesn't like a little bit of help and a little bit of extra content on their own blog? So you'll find that it's not too hard to create those relationships. And on the same kind of quid pro quo approach, share relevant posts from other blogs, link back to other blogs, and you'll see that come full circle. A couple examples of what I mean when talking about sharing and kind of blog design in general. Content is obviously going to vary depending on what industry and business you're in, but I'm going to look at two blogs here, HubSpot and Kissmetrics, which do a great job of a lot of the things that I pointed out. Up top here, you'll see that everything links back to the HubSpot site. So even though the blog itself is, about marketing information, etc., there's plenty of opportunities to figure out about HubSpot's actual products on that top nav bar. Then the calls to action are all over the place, right? You've got download the free ebook. Down at the bottom here, you've got get free marketing info. Right above that, subscribe by email. So they're giving plenty of opportunities. You can't miss the opportunity to connect with them in a greater way. And then finally, social sharing. So on the left for each article, they've got all the various networks that they want to enable people to share on, as well as on the right, just ways to subscribe and connect with the blog itself. So really consistently a good job from HubSpot. Similarly, Kiss does a great job. So upper left, you've got the share buttons. Then down below and all over the place, the calls to action, the sign up stuff. So on the left side of the screen, get powerful online marketing tips. Up top, what's cut off there is an infographic. So they created this great content that is really specific to and interesting to B2B marketers. But at the bottom of that infographic, that call to action, get more, free trial, sign up for this. Down below, that thing on the bottom right, that actually pops up when you scroll down. So it's not there, but when you get to the end of the article, it's like, hey, I like this article, and then in your face, a way to sign up for more free info. And also, one thing they do that I love is this facts and stats to tweet. So you're trying to promote sharing, right? Make it easy. So they're taking all these stats from the actual infographic and saying, these might be good things for you to share with your network and link back to. So really, really great example of how to get your blog readers to convert on whatever call to action you're looking for. Now looking at Facebook, and Facebook, usually gets groans in the B2B space because it does feel much more personal, and that may just be how you use it. I'm on that camp in general. I use Facebook primarily for personal connections, and for business connections, I'm using Twitter and LinkedIn. That said, you can't just use yourself as a one-person case study and sample, right? So I realize that there are a lot of B2B companies that have a ton of fans and a ton of interaction on Facebook. And so I did want to spend a fair amount of time looking at that, again, because LinkedIn is kind of the dominating network when you think of B2B. And I think it might be a little too easy to dismiss Facebook sometimes. So wanted to look at some strategies of what the B2B business can do in Facebook, as well as some specific actionable examples for you guys. So for one, Facebook, like I just said, not just kids and puppies. The asterisk there explains that kids and puppies work too. We've actually seen some great engagement on
We
our own
have,
Facebook
yes.
page. When we post a picture of our CEO's dog, for example, the likes go through the roof. So there is something to be said for that. And if you have that kind of if you have that personality and it can work with your brand, then hey, leverage it. But in general, think about how Facebook can really be a community environment. So more so than the really business-oriented social networks, people have kind of a frame of mind when they're on Facebook that it's about conversation and contributing. So how do you get that to happen on your page? Well, asking questions, having those calls to action, and they're asking for the likes. Just say, here's a great article that we wrote on, event marketing. Click like if you're excited about this upcoming event. It's okay to say exactly what you want them to do. In fact, you shouldn't be posting statuses that don't have a call to action of some sort. Ask for user-generated content. Ask for people to post, videos or pictures of them, and you should be using videos and pictures as well. If you're making sales calls and meeting with a really cool company that's a customer of yours, share that on your page. Say, hey, here's a great thing that one of our customers is up to. This is the kind of stuff that not only is interesting to people, but inspires them then to do further business. Like, hey, I didn't even think about using that aspect of the service or product. So you're putting out different considerations in there. And when all else fails, or when you're just looking for a boost, you can incentivize engagement. So contests work, and we'll look at some that are specific to B2B. Discounts on your service that might be, say, Facebook specific is a great way to start getting those comments and that conversation happening. And lastly, I mentioned when we were talking about blogs that the nice thing about blogs is you have complete control over the visual design, and as the opposite with Facebook, you don't. But that doesn't mean that you just, throw in the towel and give up. There are some ways using custom tabs that you can really make your page stand out from the pack. And so we'll look at those now. Exclusivity. People want stuff that they can't have. And if all it takes is a like to get some exclusive content, that's a great example. Here's HubSpot again. I promise this will be the last HubSpot example. But they do really well. They're a great case study for B2B social marketing. So they kind of have this little teaser ad where they blur out a certain amount of information, and you click like, and that opens up exclusive content. And this is set up as their welcome tab. So this is default. If you go to their Facebook page and don't currently like their page, this is what you're going to see. If you already are a fan of the page, you're going to be served different information. And that's a relatively simple thing to set up in your admin controls for your Facebook page, is what tab folks land on when they first come and visit your page. Call to actions, again, make sure they're everywhere. Here's another example of a welcome tab from a place that makes prefab steel buildings, if you're in the market for that.
New building.
And so on this welcome tab, click like, right? Don't forget to click like above with an arrow pointing to the like button. Download our product guide. Sign up for steel building specials with these big download and sign up videos, or sign up buttons. Watch our videos, view more pictures. Everything here has a very specific call to action, and that's compelling, and you're going to find the one that is what you're looking for. So nice example here.
They have good tabs too. Free
Yes.
quote request, resource center.
I know, I considered using a couple of those as well, but so you can see it. So free quote request, there's lead gen right there for people who are on and maybe poke around. That resource center is a full product catalog of theirs. So you can, without ever leaving the comfort of Facebook, because that freaks a lot of people out, you can see all this company's products, you can get a quote, and you can engage with them, and down below, newsletter subscription. You can subscribe and opt in. Which brings me to the next feature that I would encourage you to have, is adding an opt-in form. So vertical response in your account, included free with your account, is the HTML to create opt-in forms. You can put, we only have first name and email address on this example. You can put any information, collect any information you want on that. We'll give you the HTML, and then you just go out. There's a ton of free apps that let you just copy and paste HTML into them, It turns it into a Facebook tab, and you're already going. It's really easy. You don't need any design skills. Easy way to get a custom tab on your page right off the bat. This one here is the app that's being used to display the HTML is an app called Involver, or a company called Involver. They make a lot of apps. This is just one of them called Static HTML. Contests and sweepstakes. That's a great way to build up an initial fan base. One thing that you really want to be careful with, particularly in the B2B space, is thinking about making sure that the incentive you're giving is really in line with your business. You don't want to just collect likes to collect likes. You want every fan that's coming to your page to be a potential customer, right? That's where the value is for you. This is all about lead generation and conversions. So, you see very typically win an iPad 2, like our page, win an iPad 2. Well, who doesn't want an iPad 2, right? You could be a baby diaper company. I don't have any babies, but I'll still like your page if I have a chance to win an iPad, right? So all I've done is inflated the amount of likes that this diaper company has, and I'm never, ever going to buy a product of theirs. And I'll probably unlike their page as soon as the contest is over. So what you want to think about is it a discount on your service? Is it a free month of consulting, or that's probably an incredibly generous prize.
Yes.
But whatever it is, or maybe you make iPad apps, in which case then maybe you should give an iPad out. But the whole point is you want to give an incentive that is going to attract the kind of people that you can continue to sell to down the road. So make sure that you're thinking about that. But if you do, contests and sweepstakes and the like can be very, very successful ways, especially if you're trying to build up an initial audience. See that spike in new fans, and then once you've got them, you think about everything else we're talking about from a content perspective of how to keep them coming back and how to get them to keep your company front of mind. And the last feature, what I want to talk about if you have customer support is, one of the things we talked about earlier was feedback and this idea that we don't want people leaving negative comments on the wall, etc. Oftentimes, those are support issues. People are having frustrations with your product or your service. And if you have a specific place for them to go, as Dell does here, where they're not handling it on Facebook, but they're telling about all the channels that you have to get support. So that cuts down a huge amount of the back and forth conversations that could happen, keeps them away from the wall, just out for everybody to see. As we finish up Facebook, I just wanted to look at some content ideas that will work well in the B2B space. So here we have an example from our own wall. This is a great example of behind the scenes. That's our director of lifecycle marketing, Kim Stiglitz. She won an award for work she'd done, or no, that's not it. That's a picture of an award, but the actual date, it was her 3-year anniversary with the company. So we just posted something saying, hey, going into the weekend, wanted to recognize our director of lifecycle marketing, etc. That got a huge response, much more than when we post a link to the blog or something like that. This other example from Fluke Corporation, they make tools, I believe, of some sort. You can tell I'm not a
customer,
a very handy person, but they got 59 likes and 14 comments by showing a video of one of their electricians checking out a new tool that he has in the office. So chances are that the fans of Fluke Corporation are also in this B2B space, right? They're also electricians, contractors, etc. They're going to be interested and totally geeking out on this cool new tool that this guy's excited about too. So you're tapping into their interests and giving them reasons to keep checking out your page and seeing what other kind of content they're giving. Video is another really popular content. So that last example actually was a video, right? But a lot of people think, oh, video pictures in the B2B space, kind of boring. But there are things out there that you can do to think outside of that box. So this is a recycling company. They do recycling for businesses. They have a live webcam constantly just taping their recycling bin, right? Like, that's stupid, but it's totally, totally something that I've used in examples several times. I've read blog posts about it. Like, here I am, I'm talking about it. And when somebody asks me what a company that provides recycling consulting to large corporations is, I'm going to say eCycler. And so, that works. But it doesn't only have to be live video, right? It's also, the idea in general is that video is generally more engaging content. So if you go to a trade show, there's always like goofy booths going on at a trade show, right? There's somebody who's got a big spin the wheel for prizes. Might even be vertical response if you go to the right trade show.
Yep, that's right.
To film that, do some. There's plenty of opportunities out there. You got to get out of that headspace that you're a completely boring business. Back to the blog, right? There's no reason your blog can't be on Facebook, and this is an example from our page. One of the nice things about keeping things within the Facebook environment for people who don't like to leave it, they can read your blog, link out to it, and they can like and share it among Facebook and get that content out there. And lastly, customer profiles. I mentioned that when we were talking about blogging, but I think it works at Facebook a lot too, particularly because as a business page on Facebook, you can go and like other business pages. Like you can see on the bottom there that VR likes Google and Salesforce. They're partners of ours. By liking them, I can tag them in different things. So if you feature a customer of some sort, you can say, you like their page, and then you can tag that customer, and your status is going to show up on their wall as well, and open your company up to their audience as well. But this is an example from our page where we feature every couple of months or so a nonprofit customer of ours. And we've seen a huge boost in signups to the nonprofit program and a lot of social buzz about our nonprofit program because of it. So great example of how with nowhere on this, at the top we say we let nonprofits email for free, and then the entire feature is about whatever organization we're featuring at that time. But they share it with other nonprofits they know, and they say, hey, what is the free email for nonprofits? Like, it's a great way to get that word of mouth going. Deep breath. Facebook, figured out. On to Twitter, which is my favorite network personally. It's real time and it's really active, right? It's just moving really fast. There's a ton of information. I use Twitter primarily as my main news source. I follow people that I trust to lead me to the right content. And I start my day, instead of going blog to blog to blog, starting on Twitter and seeing what people are talking about. That said, that activity level of Twitter is very intimidating to a lot of people. Like, how do you come up with content for that? So it's really about repurposing it. You've got a lot of content out there, whether it's an email you've sent, a blog post, news about your company, great, but also media that you're consuming as well. So did you read a great blog post on somebody's blog? Did you read a new report about your industry? The people who are following you in the B2B space are, we would assume, in the same industry as you, who are interested in some sort of related news. So that's a great thing to share with them and add value. In the same way, by following people and brands that you like and work with, you can get that content, so retweet them, and you're not stuck trying to come up with original content all the time. And make sure, of course, to remember that social piece, that relationship stuff. You want to thank people when they share content of yours and vice versa. You can do the conversation thing that I mentioned with Facebook, is really ask questions, initiate a dialogue. But sometimes, particularly if you're just getting started, you can ask a question and it's basically crickets, and that can be discouraging. But I would encourage you too to look at existing conversations that are already happening. Enter in search terms into Twitter search for whatever business you're in, commercial real estate. See what kind of conversations people are having. A couple things that can happen there. One, you can find new people to follow. And two, you can, interject and give your opinion. And I think that's a big thing in the B2B space is establishing your expertise. And when we start looking at some of the other social networks in a second, you'll notice that a lot of them really are exactly for that, is establishing your expertise in the space. So Twitter can be a good way to kind of take a baby step into there, but then you need places to expand beyond 140 characters if you really want to be shown as an expert or thought leader in any space. So the 140 characters piece is a good one because it is limiting, right? You have to think of it like an email subject line. You have a very limited amount of space to compel people to click through to whatever content you're getting. So again, the CTA concept, you have to have a good call to action. You want it to be relevant and useful and have a sense of urgency. Old news, the older news is, the less it gets clicked on, right? So you want to be on top of trends, and of course you guys already are, I'm sure, because you're already following, industry thought leaders, etc. So you know what's going on. So get your spin out there early. Exclusivity, uniqueness is a good thing too, like we looked at with the Facebook page. So if it's an offer, you have exclusive offer to your Twitter peeps. Leaving space for retweets is just a side note. So with the idea that you want people to retweet your tweets, that 140 character limit gets even more limiting because they have to fit your username uh, and maybe even their commentary in there as well. So, I would suggest not pushing the limit to that 140 characters, trying to keep tweets more around 100 to 120 and leave that space for people to manipulate it a little bit. And if you're trying to figure out, what is getting the most traction from a content perspective, the best way to do that is to measure in clicks and retweets, what is compelling to people. So essentially, you're doing a content audit, which is something that we do here frequently, both for our blog, Facebook, Twitter, any network we are on. We are constantly revisiting the kinds of content that's resonating most with the audience. So this is an example of the top 5 clicked on tweets that we had over a period last year. So I kind of bundled them into what areas we're hitting, and you'll see that they hit a lot of those things that we thought about with content considerations. So how-tos are huge. And this is applicable to your blog, to anything you're doing. These are the kinds of headlines that get people interested. So how-tos, numbers and lists, top 10 this, 17 ways to grow your blog. Refute it all you want, be annoyed by it all you want. This is true time after time. This is an older content audit I did, but more recent ones, it's always those numbers and lists. I would say that would be the number one thing. News and announcements, that's that relevancy and that timeliness. Rewards and offers, you can't discount the idea. See what I did there? Discount. You can't discount the idea that incentivizing clicks doesn't work. It absolutely does, and proven time and time again. But again, think about making sure that you're not just giving away the farm, that there's actual value in what you're trading for that. So maybe it's a discount, maybe it's a white paper, whatever it is, some sort of reward or offer will compel people to click through. And lastly, a little tongue-in-cheek, but the idea of either controversy or playing off of a pop culture icon. So this tweet was from when Charlie Sheen had his meltdown last year, and it's a link to another article from Copyblogger about online marketing and what it has to do with Charlie Sheen. And hey, it gets the clicks. People, anything that kind of makes people go, huh? Will generally get them to click through. All right, the best of the rest. There's LinkedIn. See, I told you I wouldn't completely ignore it. And maybe best of the rest is a little boastful because there's even more than this. And Google Plus could be a huge, huge player in the coming months and year, but right now it's still kind of emerging, so I didn't want to spend a huge amount of time on that. But I want to go over a few things here that I think that you can probably find pretty immediate value in the social space for B2B business. So first off was Google Plus. I think Google Plus is great for a lot of reasons, but the two main ones are personal attribution. So you'll see in this status update we did, Mi Trong, who's one of our marketing managers, wrote this blog post. Instead of just posting from vertical response, we can actually tag him as a individual contributor. So it's a great way to highlight other people who are helping to contribute, or your employees, as well as bring up their search relevance. So you'll see below this example, and this is something I shared on Google+, Ryan Gosling, email marketer. If you're into things like Charlie Sheen and other funny internet memes, you might enjoy it. But that screenshot is from search results. So Google owns search, right? And now they're trying to own social, and part of that is the integration of the two. So when you search for Ryan Gosling email marketer and you're in my network, I'm actually going to get attributed to sharing this within a Google search result. So it's a great opportunity to build up thought leadership and SEO for your own personal brand if you're a sole proprietor, or your company's brand. And then on the left, you have what you've probably already heard about. It's what most people talk about with Google+, is the idea of circles, the idea that you can lump your connections into different circles depending on what the relationship is. And so what this is an example of kind of what we have here. We've got team members, other industry marketers, customers, former employees. If you click down, you'd see competitors. And so we can filter our stream to see what certain groups are talking about, as well as sharing information with just the subset, which is a great opportunity. If you've got customers versus non-customers, you can give them different information. The one caveat I would say here is that I would focus on kind of the search engine stuff right now, because until Google Plus gets a wider adoption, and depending on what industry you're in, if you're a marketer, it may be a different story, but depending on if you're that steel building seller, you might not see a lot of traction on Google Plus right now. But I think it's worth establishing a presence for the search reasons. Also for the tool reasons. So Google Plus Hangouts. The president just had one not too long ago. If it's good enough for the White House, it's got to be good enough for you, right? And the concept of a Hangout is that it is essentially, a virtual meeting among guests and a host. And so you can use that for external communication. You can do live webinars, demos of your products. If you're doing a press release, why not do it live? Pretend you've got a press conference going on. That's a cool use for it. But until, again, there's really wider adoption of Google+, I think Hangouts actually have much more value internally. So many of you are probably using Google Apps as a collaboration tool internally. Google Plus Hangouts, you can all be sitting in a Hangout and working on an app together. The collaboration possibilities are really, really cool with Google Plus. So if you've already dismissed it, I'd give it another look. SlideShare is a highly underlooked B2B tool. The nice thing about SlideShare over any other hosting area is that you can have clickable links in it, right? So it's like a PDF. So you'll see the links down here that the arrows are pointing to are all clickable and will actually take me to content out there. So it's a perfect space for the call to actions that I'm talking about everywhere else. You can embed them right into a presentation. We could have the webinar that we're having here at the end could have a clickable thing that says sign up for a free vertical response account or whatever it is. And you see that get in touch button there. That's an example of a call to action, right? So you do that, and right within the SlideShare space, you can sign up for more information and actually do a direct, this is just a typical lead gen form built into the SlideShare interface. Great tool and a great way to, sharing great content, great way to establish thought leadership. Along the same lines, LinkedIn groups. So, one thing to think of, even outside of LinkedIn groups, is just niche social networks. So if there's a social network specific to the industry you're in, or finding a LinkedIn group specific to the industry that you're in, is a great way to contribute to conversations and share your content out to a wider audience. So, this one at the top here is 5 ways to master influencer outreach with B2B social media. It's something they're sharing their own content right there within the group, which is full of members like myself who are looking for social media news. Along the same lines, you have LinkedIn Answers, which you can go and either ask questions, but what I would say from a marketing standpoint is look for questions to answer, right? So these here, the screenshot shows questions from my network, and I think that my network is a little bit stressed out right now.
Yes.
But I could go and search or browse among any of those topics for people who are trying to find out information. You can be the provider of that information and make that connection. However, LinkedIn Answers, I've noticed, is hit or miss. I think that if you really have the time to invest in this kind of expertise and thought leadership space in a Q&A kind of forum, Quora is your way to go. Quora is like Yahoo Answers for the intelligent set, I would say. It is not, whereas, okay, let's put it this way. Yahoo Answers is a little unfiltered. Quora is definitely, everyone has a professional profile attached to it. And the nice thing about it is, you know, you can put in your headline exactly why you are the appropriate person to answer the question. And then you'll see these arrows by each answer that goes, these are upvotes, so then people can vote your answer up. And the better your answer is going to get it to the top and give you the most coverage. So it encourages, and the community on Quora is very diligent about getting rid of useless answers. So you don't have that kind of fluff and noise that you see in other sites. You have really good quality answers. So going around to different industries, like you can see up top these categories: B2B marketing, business to business marketing, social media. You can click through, see what questions are asking, identify yourself, of course, as the company you're coming from, but say, hey, I could offer some insight here. Really, really cool network. And again, something that if you don't feel like contributing to, a really good tool just for you to kind of learn about what conversations are happening out there. And finally, I'm going to finish on Stumble Upon. This is a graph of social traffic. So traffic that's being driven to websites, and this goes across, I think, 3 million websites have been tracked here to see what social networks are driving the most traffic. You'll see most of them are lumped at the bottom, and there's two at the top fighting each other for supremacy. And those two are Facebook, go figure, and Stumble Upon. People don't think of Stumble Upon at all sometimes as a social media tool or as a traffic driver, but it is an incredible traffic driver. Stumble, if you have a blog or content on your corporate website, I highly suggest checking out Stumble, both from a advertising spend kind of approach, but also organically to think about how you can drive more traffic to your site with it. And here's a quick just example of what I mean. So when you go in, you can have paid stumbles versus free stumbles. So free stumbles happen organically as something gets more popular. So you can see, and I think as low as like 5 cents a hit, you can be buying stumbles. So it's definitely a low cost way to start playing around with it. Most people I know spend quite a bit more on it because they see such great results. At VR, upwards of 90% of our traffic to the blog is coming from Stumble Upon, not from Google, not from AdWords. So there is something to be said for investing a little bit into a spend here. But the idea is you start seeding the audience essentially with some paid stumbles, as they call it, but essentially as somebody's using the network, they're going to click through and looking for new content in areas that they've expressed interest in. And so some are paid where they're sponsored to come up, just like a Google search result would be. But as something gets more popular and as people organically like it, you start getting it stumbled for free. And so you can really start looking at how to drive traffic to specific pages on your site. Great tool. If you're already doing some online marketing, I'd suggest you do some tests and try and put Stumble in your mix. And that's it.